my wife, the painter Suzanne Jolson, a question. Suzanne, do you know that painting we've seen of the soldiers in the dressing room drinking with the girl at the piano?
Oh, the Hunt painting that's at the museum.
Yeah, where is that painting?
It's in the museum here that I don't like.
Yeah, it's the one you really don't like. Who did the painting? Do you know? Can anyone picture this painting? It's a 19th century.
I want to say it's Hunt.
It's an academic picture, in a sense. And it's a group of soldiers in someone's living room, and they're beginning to drink the liquor of the people who own the house. You can see they're already a little drunk, and they're looking over objects in the room, and you can see they're thinking about what they're going to steal. And the mother is like this, and the daughter is very tensely at the piano, where they clearly forced her to be. Now, can any of you picture this painting? It's in this city. Anyway, the thing that's fascinating to me about this painting, because it's so clearly a narrative, it so clearly has a storyline to it, it's very useful when you see a painting like that to say, I know what this painting means. Because narratives have meanings. And you can unpack the narrative by looking at what everyone's doing in the picture. And that, the net of that, is the meaning of the picture. That's why things are like you find them in the picture, because it has a certain intention. This gets to be an interesting question when it comes to abstraction, because I'm not so sure the term meaning is the right term when we talk about abstraction, or when we talk about non-representational art. I think a better way to look at it is to ask yourself, what are the qualities of the object? What is its nature? What are its properties? In the same way that you would say, for example, you wouldn't say about a tree, if you saw a tree outside, you wouldn't say, what does the tree mean? The reason you don't say, what does the tree mean, is because trees don't have meanings. They have qualities, they have properties, from which meanings can be taken. But the tree itself has no meaning per se. It simply has qualities. And I think the better way to look at abstraction is to ask yourself, what are its qualities? What is it doing? And then from that you may infer meanings, but the better way to understand the painting is not through the question of meaning, but through the question of qualities. So let me just tell you a little about how this painting works. Can you tell me more? I realized this just today as I was looking at this room. I thought, wait a minute, I understand this room finally. Here's the thing. I first moved to New York, or back to New York, in the late 1960s. I was born in Brooklyn. And I went out to the West Coast to San Francisco for graduate school. When I came back, it was the late 60s. I moved back to New York. I was in Manhattan. And I asked myself, what is the most important thing I can do here? What kinds of things can I say or work on? And I decided that the most interesting question I could ask was, how can I expand the experience of picture space? In other words, there are lots of ways that pictures operate. For example, a cubist picture operates in one way, an abstract expressionist painting by someone else works in a very different way, and all of these are expanding the experience of picture space. So I said to myself, what can I do to add on to that language of devices, if you will? And one of the things I said to myself right away was, I'm not going to let anything cross anything else. Everything will be next to each other like this. Because if things cross each other, this is what regular pictures do. Everything crosses something in a regular picture. So if a person is standing and they put their hands down, their hands are in front of their leg. So I thought, maybe if I could take away all of what I call the crossing cues and just have everything move around like that, maybe that would be a contribution. So this painting is one of the examples of a painting in which nothing crosses anything. And what instead it does is it moves from over here, this side of the painting is very much about the painting as an object. So these parts mirror this real edge. This is the physical part of the painting. This is the painting as an object. And as you move around it, because remember, I'm not saying move across it, I'm suggesting that things wrap around. So as you move around this, you get to about here, it's still remembering this. This again is remembering the box. When we get down to here, it folds in, and by the time we get to the other end of it here, we almost have like a little lake, or a little turned body of water or something. So what I wanted to do in these paintings was move them from objects to images. And they worked by wrapping themselves around, but not crossing anything. So Klaus installed this show, and he put this painting, which is owned by my brother-in-law. That's his representation. He put this painting next to it, and I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to talk about this? And the fascinating thing is, if there's one big break in my practice, it was ultimately the abandoning of the idea that things couldn't cross. And once I said to myself, oh, they can definitely cross, in fact, they should cross aggressively, then what happened was the space of the picture completely opened up. So this one is probably more layers of space, and they're all crossing each other. So what we have here, I'll start at the back of the picture, so to speak. The back of the picture is this dark place. And on top of the dark place is this oval in here. And that oval is behind this yellow object, but it's also attached to this object here, which is on top of the yellow. So it even casts a shadow. So there are layers of picture space that are moving in, and then there are problems with it because this object is partially made of the thing in the back and partially made of the thing in the front. So I realized that my contribution to painting is, it's a really simple idea. Formalism is meant to make things that are very dependable, where you can see what they are, and you can see what they do. And I'll get to these two in a moment because they speak to this as well. And surrealism is about objects that are completely undependable. In fact, the definition of the surrealist object to me is that it's problematic. So all of the devices you see in surrealism come down to a very simple thing. Things don't work the way they're supposed to. That's basically what surrealism comes down to, I think. And so I always thought it has very little to do with dreams. It had more to do with problematizing the seeing of the world. So this is probably, so do you guys know the term elevator pitch? I'll tell you what this is. The elevator pitch, it's a Hollywood term. It means you explain the movie you want to make in the time you're in the elevator. So you have to say, it's Guys and Dolls, but it stars Brad Pitt, and they go, I love it, give him the money. That's the elevator pitch. So in a way, it's a trivial way to talk about painting, because it's very glib. But it also is very good because it forces you to think very clearly about what it is that you're doing. So the elevator pitch for the work of mine is using the tools of formalism to build the house of surrealism. That's the elevator pitch. That took me, it took me 50 years to come up with it. It was funny, I was at this dinner, and these two young artists were there, and they go, oh, I can't talk about my work, oh, it's so impossible, what do you say, and everything. I said, oh, it's nothing to it. And they said, you jerk. And I said, they said, okay, go ahead and do it. And I gave the elevator pitch, and you could see them go, oh, that kind of does do it, doesn't it? So let me tell you about these two, which I think, in a way, repeat what I've said about this, but like slightly different names. This is my only contribution to the installation of this show. Is I said to Klaus, maybe we could put the earliest painting in the show, 1973, next to the newest painting in the show, 2015. Because I think they actually, well, they're both squares for one thing. So they both have a certain kind of formal agreement. But they also benchmark the entire practice. So this one operates by the rules of that one, in that nothing crosses anything. This image is compounded from two ideas. One is that this part of the black fits perfectly inside of the square, much like the way that corner of that painting works, where the parts reiterate each other, right? And this part is about mirroring. So this part is doing this, so that the physical side, and you mention the image and object, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because this is a perfect example of the image-object question, because what you see here is this surface is a real surface. This is the object. And this surface is a picture idea. This is the fiction of the picture. So it's an image, a mirrored image that's made of something real with something fictive. And this is the same thing. This is the real object, and this is the picture of the object. And then they both came together to create this image in which, again, nothing crosses. This one, everything crosses. So the layers in this painting, and after I say this, by the way, I hope I'm putting enough ideas out that maybe you guys have questions, because that's the most interesting part to me. In that I could talk about this work, but I know about this work. And I know the way I think about this work. But I don't know the way you think about this. And I don't know what maybe you want to know about it. So I hope let me talk about this one for a minute though. The planes in this picture are first, this one, the black frame, and then on the black frame is this field of stripes, and then that's framed off in time. But the curious, I want to say one more thing about it. This also doubles each time. This is one, this is twice this, and this is twice that. So the volumes move around like that. The thing that, and somebody noticed this at the opening list, that was really good. They said, maybe this back here, which is now behind the red, even though the red is actually behind this, but maybe this is the key to the painting right here. And this is where it's interesting in the way accidents play into the making of things. Because this was not an intention. I really was thinking I would just make them big enough so that then I could frame them off. And I just got it wrong. But once I taped it off and I realized I had these, I thought what this does is it starts to suggest that maybe these things don't attach to this, but maybe they end here. And that, maybe not. But I think it's possible. Let me put it this way. Someone last night thought it was possible. It's what we call a reading. They made a reading. But that's what interests me about the pictures, is getting the cues, the implications to bump into each other in a way that problematizes the cues. So that's, again, using formalism to make the disturbing space of surrealism, if you will. So that's kind of what I do. That's the stuff I do. know within reason about my personal life or my practice, I'm happy to answer. So if anything's crossed your mind, just let me know.
Something just came across my mind.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the reality of the object and
Yes.
the picture and the thing.
Exactly.
What kind of quality do you think can we attach to illusionism or the illusion in a painting? It is part of reality too. So where's the opposite between the real object and illusion?
Well, I think the illusion is what I would put in the box called the picture. You know, so all of the devices that let you make pictures, illusion being one of them, fits in there. And then all of the other qualities of the object are what make the painting. The painting is the real. I've always said this. If a dog comes in the room, the dog can chew the painting, but he can't chew the picture. And the illusion is part of the picture making. So like, think of your work. This is Wolfgang, you may know his work. And Wolfgang's paintings are highly pictorial, but they also, because of the way in which you aggressively treat the thing, they fail. They kind of break down. And it's somewhere the tension is between the breaking down or the commenting on the object and then how much of the picture survives, or the illusion, right? And it's keeping those in some sort of an interesting tension. Like, I always think the best example, or when I first really became aware of this, was the first time I saw, this must have been in the early 70s, I saw this fantastic Kienzle painting. And what it was a field, a plowed field that went back in picture space, you know, completely mechanical perspective, right, to a vanishing point. But it was painted on this enormous, thick wall of hay that had tar on it and everything. And I kept thinking, I looked at this, I thought, this is such a German solution to this problem. It's like smashing two cars together at 100 miles an hour. Because the rules of this recessional space and the rules of this object were completely incompatible. And the power of the painting was taking these two rules and smashing them into each other. And that's when I first looked at it and I thought, boy, I'm really gonna bring more to this. This is amazing solution. It really is fantastic. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
But may I
please.
add something to this aspect?
Yeah.
Because I was thinking, I was living with the paintings, and I know the change when I talk from the change of the 70s into the 80s. It's my time where we're really close with Kienzle, because Kienzle was in the same school with the same teacher as me, and so on. And I realized when I saw this painting, when you pointed it out, that aspects of this whole object thing are in your paintings with a different solution. No?
Yeah, that's right.
Also, you made it also in your way, in the same time, in the same quality, or in a different quality, but in the same visual strength. So a painting like this, which could be a graphical solution, which is in the left corner, is really aufgerissen, also disturbed on the right side. In fact, like a field where you have this Pflug, where you have a mechanical thing to manage it. So in a way, I would say maybe it's a sign of the times or something like this, but on the other hand, everybody has his own tools to manage it.
Sure.
And you made it in the same way.
Thank you. I think that for me the difference was that I was always thinking that I would do these things gradually and I would think my way through them and then I would feel my way. And the striking thing about the Kienzle was how just completely ignored all of that subtlety and just took the two ideas, I think, at the most extreme. and bang them together. That was for me the surprise, was how, I call it a collisional space, where they literally parts almost smash together and sparks come out.
Yeah, but would you make a difference between Rauschenberg and Richter?
Rauschenberg and Richter?
Not Richter, Kiefer.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes?
Yeah, I think so. Because Rauschenberg, I don't think of as particularly a picture maker. You know, he uses pictorial elements. He'll use reproductions and paintings, but they don't make a coherent picture space.
Okay.
You know, you don't walk up to a Rauschenberg and then drop in. Whereas the thing that was interesting about the Kiefer was that it was this traditional drop-in space, thwarted, made completely impossible by the wall that it was done on. You could say it's like graffiti, when people, you know, do pictures on brick walls, because the brick wall wants to be like this, and the picture wants to be like that. So it's those two things, right? It is the same idea, really. It's just one's in a museum. Yeah.
Color, Farbe.
Oh, thank you.
Is it a mere tool for you to solve problems? You didn't talk about color at all.
Yeah, I know. Because color's the trickiest thing to talk about. Because I have no theory of color. I have no theory of color.
What color is the house of surrealism that you build?
Yeah. So sometimes the color is what I would call associative, right? So to be linked to the world, like this painting, is basically the color in a representational picture. This would be the color for sky and the color for light. So I use them, though, in the wrong way, so that the sky blue is woven so that it stays together, making the blue a problem. And then the yellow, instead of being soft and opening up the picture space, is instead this object that actually has little black things stuck behind it to make sure you see that it's something right there. So that's the way I understood the color in that. The color in this one, which is from a very different time, came from going to Padua and seeing the Giottos. And this is a direct lift of a part of a palette in a Giotto. Even down to the mark making at the bottom was taken from the way Giotto paints garments. You know, he has a very kind of schematic way of painting garments. It doesn't do like that. He just kind of fills it in kind of like that. So the color in this is very associative, comes out of history. This one is local color. And sometimes, for example, for a period, we could go in the other room, I could show you a different idea about color. So this painting, you know what I'm going to do? Let me see if I can do this. I'm going to take that little one down and put it in together. Okay. See, I can handle this as a man. No, actually, no, they're not. No, I shouldn't be doing it. I should get permission. Can I hold this for a while? These two paintings are part of a period I worked on that came out of, large degree came out of Caspar David Friedrich. And there's some kind of dramatic backlighting. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to work on the power of light to make meaning in a picture. But I didn't want to put the hero in the middle of the picture. So I thought maybe there's a way that I can speak about this kind of light and this kind of world without having someone standing there contemplating the ocean. So these I came to call the templates. Templates. And they came out of, in a sense, the nature of these templates was they were somewhat like Biedermeier furniture. They have those same kinds of simplified shapes. So they're somewhat associative, but they're not so associative that you become kind of distracted by them. So I actually brought one of the templates here from New York. This is literally what all of the paintings that have this shape in it were made with. It's always the same size, and I'll show you. So, and I'll show you, so it was used, the templates were used to make positive forms in these spaces, but also I realized after I worked with them for a while that they could make negative spaces. So let me show you how this template works on this one. So even though this is the figure here, when I came to this part, this was made from fitting that template on there and treating it as though this was the end of an object and these were holes in the picture. So in fact, this painting flips back and forth because on this side of the painting, this area is all figured. This is the edge of the figure, right? It's almost like this is a solid and this is a void. And when you get over here, this side of the painting, the same black field, these things are now the solids, and this is the void. So the painting has pulled itself through itself like turning a glove inside out. Right? And that was the idea about the picture space here. So this, I think this is the only glove picture in the show, but I've done about a dozen pictures that I call glove paintings that are all about starting in one part of the painting where everything is positive, and then you move around in it, and you go, I'm coming out over here, and it wasn't like that over there. So they're like pulling a glove through itself. So this is a glove painting.
Yeah, the German expression for this is called Umstülpung.
And this would translate.
Umstülpung.
And how would you translate that?
It's the
It's
same
the exact
word you
same
say.
thing.
Yeah. It's a very unusual German word, but it describes really kind of more than a mechanical thing. Yeah? It's a kind of Umstülpung means the world turns or something like this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Inside out. Something
Yeah.
like this.
So it was funny, we were in the museum, everything is so compressed in my mind because I've been here 4 days and it's all squeezed together. But we were in the museum and we were looking at 13th century Italian paintings. And the interesting thing was, so many of them had a framing device which is made of 4 circles, parts of circles, and parts of a diamond that fits through it. It's a very common device, all through 13th, 14th, goes up even to the 15th century. Tintoretto uses it. So this painting is the use of that 13th century device. There's the square, and there are the 4 circles. This is literally the way they made framing devices in the 13th century. So I always liked it, so I used it again. This painting has under it, and which gets to a small idea, but maybe not a bad one, of the way in which certain paintings have embedded in them their history. So underneath here, you can see all of these marks are from making things like that the first time. So here's the one here, like that. It's the same one, the same turn back. And then I think there are some others that float through there. But years later, I washed the whole thing out, and that's when I put in these black things that were designed to completely violate the rules of this canvas. So the canvas has this kind of wonderful symmetry to it. And then the black things, I really just sat around and thought, where can I put things in this painting where they would least belong? And that's where those black things went. I thought, right? Yeah. Which is a game, by the way. I'll tell you. You probably do you know the game Battleship? Is it a German? Yeah. Yeah, and the rules of Battleship, I always say Battleship is the perfect example of how composition works. Because the rules of Battleship is to put things in the places where nobody expects to find them, right? It's a fantastic thing. If you can play Battleship in a painting, you know, then it has kind of energy to it. People say like, oh, I didn't think that would be like that. Oh, wow. Did you have a question? No.
Yeah, I always question myself about, what's your relationship to size?
Size.
Size, yes. How do you come up with the idea? You have an idea to make a picture, to paint something, and how do you decide? How does it work that you come up with an idea or a decision for the size?
It's a nice question. I can tell you how recently it's been happening. I was in an art store before the summer, and somebody had left a little canvas, a pre-stretched canvas. They had left it there, and I was waiting in line to buy things, and I thought, oh, I think I'll take this. And what it was a curious choice, because when I really looked at it, I realized that it was made for people who made seascapes, you know, or landscapes. So it was like, it was 2 squares wide. And I remember I brought it home, and Suzanne said to me, what the hell are you going to do with that? I said, I have no idea what I'm going to do with this. Because it was so wrong in my head. So I left it around, and then I realized, it took me a while to realize, I thought, wait a minute. It's not necessary to see it as one long thing. You could see it as 2 perfect squares. And so what I did ultimately, and you saw I sent you, Klaus, the image for it. In fact, you had that great remark about the ambassador painting. But what I finally realized was I could treat half the painting as a perfect square of black paint, like an object, again, where it's completely real. And then what I did was, next to it, I made another square just slightly smaller, and another square that bumped up against the edge of the painting over here. And then I, like those bands in the blue painting around the corner, I painted a ground down, and then I painted the littlest black square, and I painted the grid over it very lightly. And when that dried, I painted the next biggest one, and I painted the grid again over that lightly. And then the big one I didn't touch. So what happens is, the littlest one is in deep atmospheric perspective, in a way, because it's buried in all the paint. And then the second one is a little bigger and a little closer. So it's buried in a little less atmospheric space. And then the third one is a true object that sits coincident with the edge of the canvas. And that was that. And so I've been working since then on double squares and triple squares. I found these ones really horrible. 3 squares, 1. And I figured them out too. They were not easy to figure out, but so that doesn't speak to size, but it speaks to proportions, the question of proportions. And I've been, maybe I will say this about size. I have increasingly been making them smaller so that I can manage them alone in the studio in the summer. I don't have to get somebody to help me. So it's simple.
I just want to pick up a bit on the color question, but not so general, more specifically with this painting. What was happening in the mid-90s where they got really colorful? And this is a particular kind of fabric or material that has a shimmer to it. It's not like, I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about this group of works as this looking like kind of representative.
Yeah. Well, somebody said a nice thing about these paintings, the template paintings, as they were going through their death spiral. It took about 10 years to work through these. And at the very end, there was painting. Can we just quickly look at this one? I want to show you something right here. This one has the last, almost the last of the templates. It's right here. It's almost gone. It's almost buried in this red area. And somebody said to me about these at this point, it's as though the template paintings were beginning to melt in your mind. And I said, oh, that's good. I think that's right. So that's what happens when the template paintings completely melted down. And the other thing that they're connected to, do you know the Magritte Vache paintings?
Yes.
It's the Magritte Vache paintings. I looked at those.
This is your period of.
This is my Vache paintings, exactly. There were 2 years when I went, oh, just do this, and you can do that, and that's what happened.
And so then you return to a more narrow kind of spectrum of colors, because I understand that the Bosch paintings, isn't the legend that they didn't sell, so he went back to...
His wife made him go back.
Yeah.
She came to me and she said, okay, I hope you got that out of your system. You have 2 years of that. We didn't make any money. I really like the life we have. Now please go back and make your pictures. And he said, I will count. And that was the end of it.
So you went shopping for a bunch of color and everything melted, and then you just...
It's something like that. It also was, there's a painting I showed in Austria in a big show called the Silent Baroque. It was and one of the paintings I had in it was this big black banner. And I always thought, ooh, I like that banner. It had some little strings on the end of it. And so this, in a weird way, that red thing, the red area, was a return to the black painting from the Silent Baroque show of 20 years earlier. So it's part of my own personal mythology of it. And the other thing that, this is, this maybe goes right back to the beginning, to what I said about narratives. That in narratives you can pick apart the function of things and how they make the story. This has a narrative device in it that you would see in a play, where if one of the characters in the play was in bright light, which is like the little character in the upper left corner, you would know that this was a lucky character. And if the other character was in the dark, like the one next to it, the blue and gray one, you would know that this was a very unlucky character. So I tried to put that painting together the way you would compose with characters in like a cartoon or something.
Well, as you said, like, this first painting came from your trip to Padua.
Yeah.
Is this intuitive decisions about color, or do these have outside external references? I mean, does the color come from somewhere in the real world? Or is it, are you just responding to what's happening on the surface of the canvas?
No, I think everything that's going on back here, and I think back here is the right way to look at it. I think everything that's going on back here is like a very delightful little world. It's almost like, you know, a sunny summer in the cartoon world or something, right? And then this thing is in front of you with all of its problems, and then behind it is this delightful world. So it was attached to the way things look, you know, when we look around, I think.
And that strange shimmer?
Well, the fabric. The first paintings I made in New York, and I was very self-destructive and I didn't keep them, and it's one of my great regrets, really, were all painted on fabric that had patterns on them, like flowers and things. And I would paint big things over them. So you know this device because it's a paint device. I mean, a polka device. From years later, and I kept thinking, I did that in 1967. But I don't have the evidence, so it means nothing. But this was a return to that too. I thought, let's play around with the grounds more. So it was, I think this whole period for a year or so was a way for me to just let that whole argument about the templates go. The end was the final party. you know.
Artist. I would like to add a title from your catalog from these days, which I was also always impressed about it, and it's called Same Body, Different Day. And it describes very clearly what happens.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
It's not about style.
Yeah. In fact, style, it always seemed to me that style should be, there's a term in, I want to recommend a book. It's one of my favorite books. It's called Emergence. And it's about the area called emergent complexity. And it's about how simple algorithms create complex outcomes. And I lost the train there. I like that idea so much, but I don't know where it was going. You just said what?
About style?
Same body.
Also same body, different day.
It's not about style.
Not about style.
Not about style.
Oh, yeah, not about style, exactly. So the point is that what you really should do is have a set of ways to work like the way emergence works, where there's simple things you do, and then out of them comes the complexity. But you don't start out saying to yourself, let's create a style. You know, what is my look? That the look actually should be an emergent quality. It should be a byproduct of conducting your job, of doing something. And the perfect analogy that we would all know in a minute is when they design a jet plane. They don't say to themselves, oh, let's have it really look great. You know, we'll move the tail way out here and all. They build a jet plane to do a certain thing, right? And then from it emerges, when they're done, out of the constraints of the needs comes the plane. But they don't start with, like a kid would, like I would as a boy, just draw nifty planes. They're working and they're solving engineering problems, and at the end they go, you know, it's not a bad looking plane. But they don't start out with the idea of the style of the plane. And I think that's the way I work too. Oh, I should just add one more thing. I wasn't trained as a painter. I was trained as an industrial designer. So I still bring that kind of thinking to it, I think, where you give yourself a set of tasks, and then out of the task comes a certain appearance. But you don't start with the idea that you're looking for a certain appearance.
Sorry, is
Yeah.
drawing then something important to you to develop your concepts for the painting?
Yes.
So in terms of you're using all this very different kind of material paint, very liquid and very thick, so to bring out this precisely?
Yeah. In fact, because drawing, I even say, I teach graduate school in New York. And I say to my students, you know, they'll start talking to me about things. I'm thinking of doing this. I say, just draw it for me. And they go, I don't do drawings. I said, are you crazy? I don't do drawings. Drawings are the fantastic shortcut. So yes, I have books of drawings and I draw them. In fact, recently I didn't know what to do with myself. And I opened an old drawing book and I was going through it and I went, oh, I could revisit that question right there. So the drawings are very helpful. Yeah, and they all have drawings.
Yeah.
Not maybe this one.
Yeah.
No, actually there is drawing for this. So I want to take that language of formalism and use it in a way that disturbs that dependability. So that instead of looking at it and thinking, oh, it's that wonderful formalism, it's always like this, it's so clear and everything. With mine, hopefully, the more you look at it, you think, this is actually a mess.
Okay. Yeah, it's a very, I see a very strong formalism in the beginning of your work.
Yeah.
And a very lyrical one also.
Yeah.
It's a very a big personality inside your image here and there.
Well,
And then I see a big fight with formalism.
Yeah.
And always this not consciously painted thing like you mentioned on the red one.
Yeah.
You said you didn't make it consciously.
That's right.
And I couldn't, I said, it's impossible for me that you say you didn't do it. You didn't know that you did it.
I didn't.
And you didn't know what you did.
No.
And I couldn't believe.
I know.
And then
No, I just-
but I believe.
I know
didn't
you
say
do.
you were
I
right.
always-
But then, if I
Yeah.
look at the other paintings here around, I was really impressed by the formalism, very formal paintings like this and that one. And I looked on your webpage, the newer ones are very formalistic, they
That's
are
right.
really very big strengths.
Yeah.
Formalism. But I always loved these little details, like that one.
Yes,
This,
yes.
this one.
Yeah.
And on the other picture, the other one.
Yeah.
And then I see that one, this one you talked about.
Yeah.
And you told me, and you told us that your wife said you should stop.
The templates.
You should stop painting like that, or did I?
No, I think.
You didn't like these paintings very much. No, wash paintings. Yes, wash paintings.
Yeah, no, she liked the wash paintings.
Oh, I like. Ah, okay.
It was Magritte's wife.
I have no problem. I also don't have a problem with what.
Yeah, I don't want anybody to leave here thinking my wife doesn't like it.
No, wife is always a big
She is.
mirroring
Oh, absolutely.
point for every
both
painter.
painters.
Yeah, I know.
Yes, so I'm always looking at each other's work going,
Yeah.
you know, what do you think?
Yeah, but to come to the point is, I would like to know from you, where do you think will your last paintings be? Will there be have you already an idea?
No.
Will there still be, I just want to know one thing, will
Yeah.
there still be these things like that?
I don't
Or
know.
will they,
I don't know.
and do you think that your pitch, elevator pitch, will be still as strong?
I don't know.
And you said you created it for 15 years. 15 years you had to think about?
50.
15. 50. This is more.
Since I was very young.
Okay, so I speech. Thank you very much. But
To speak to the question of what happens next,
Yeah.
I literally, Suzanne can tell you this, I buy one stretcher at a time. And she says, oh my God, you know, why don't you have the car, you're going to town, well, get 6.
Yeah.
And I said, well, why would I get 6? She said, well, you know, you can do the next one. And then I said, well, what if I wake up tomorrow and I never want to do these like this again? So I really, and this is, I am not exaggerating, I have no idea when I go to the studio what's going to happen that day.
Okay, yeah.
I walk, and in fact, my biggest fear is always I'm going to go out there and it'll be like, oh, it's game over.
Yeah, it's a big feeling.
It can be real, you know, you can really make it impossible for yourself. I feel this all the time, that I felt that when I made these templates. I could see what they were doing, I moved the idea along, and then I thought, boy, I hope I get out of this alive. You know, I'm doing a lot of this. And then eventually I could see it was breaking down. I didn't break it down, I could see it weakening. I thought, I know too much about it. I've done everything I can think to do with it. If I did any more with it, it would be empty. It would just be so you could sell a picture. And I thought, I'm not going to do that. I can't do that. So I had to watch it slowly fall apart. So it's in a very clear place right now for me, but I do think, boy, will this be in 6 months? Because I miss certain things. Here's the funny thing. There are things in some of these other paintings that I miss very much. I wish I had them in the studio. I wish I could do that again. But you can't, at least I can't, say, okay, well, you like that so much. Of course you can do it again. It's your studio. Make anything you want. It really isn't like that. The work at a certain level gets out of your control. And you think to yourself, gee, it'd be really nice if this had more curious color, or this had softer forms, or I could use the brush more. And I'll try it. I'll do it in the studio. I'll make it. Some of these paintings will look very simple. They've actually been through 10, 12 changes. And the first one will be like, oh great, I'm going to get to make a yellow one. I'll paint the whole thing in yellow, and I look and I think, this can't be yellow. This is terrible. So then I think, well, what is it? It's not yellow, but what is it? And I'll find old paints and mix them up and look at them and think, okay, we'll just paint the whole thing out, wash the whole thing out white, and then I look and I think, wait a minute, that light yellow coming through, maybe that's good. So then I'll mix that color and put it on top, And it's like that. I mean, I literally have virtually no control once these things get started from the drawing. The drawing is really good, and I say to myself, oh wow, I'm gonna make the drawing. Then I'll have it, like 3 days, I'll make the drawing, I'll be done. And then I take the drawing and I put it up there with charcoal, and I look at it and I think, no, it's wrong. It should really be here, and I wipe this out, and I move it, and then it just goes where it goes. No. Oh, I'll say one more thing if things go where they go, and then this is my final thought on this, actually. It's a problem in what's called, you know the word, improvisation. And I was saying to someone one day, I said, it's all improvisation. And they said, oh, I hate improvisation. I'm always so worried about what's going to happen. I said, do you realize that every sentence that comes out of your mouth, unless it's a prepared speech, is an improvisation? Every sentence is an improvisation. When you started talking, you had a rough idea of maybe where you were going. But once it got going, you were like following the train. You didn't think like, oh, the next word is, because you were improvising. All sentences are improvised. And finally, all, with the best of intentions, all work is improvised. So this is the improvisation.
But I think, nevertheless, you have a very big consciousity, or how do you say?
Consciousness.
Consciousness, a very big consciousness. And it's a difference whether you improvisate without consciousness or with, and consciousness does have to do a lot with thinking. And you have to, I think you really have to, because it could be understood in a wrong way, this improvisation.
Everything can be understood in
Yeah,
a way.
but it was my
No, I take your meaning.
Now, your speech gave us informations and at least a special need. Thank you. But I wanted to tell that this painting lives with us, this one.
That's right.
And it was the exhibition and the possibility to look at it from a different side that I discovered something so important for your work, I think. And you just said it a few minutes before when you described, when you tried to paint, and you said, oh, here comes a little light. And I discovered here, on this painting, the light. Here. And this show, Jochen gives me the light. I discovered it. So it's beautiful to have the show.
So, are we there?
Yeah.